What a absolutely brilliant race in Singapore. Although you can't really call it Singapore, more like Singer Amazing. Nailed it. Today we are talking about that's the intro I had.
That's so bad.
Singapore, singer good, singer met. That was where I was going.
That was poor. That was Singapore.
That was poor. Yeah, obviously.
Very poor.
That was the only intro I had. Anyway, welcome to the 107 podcast with myself, Jacob, and my co-host Ash. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Singapore. What a great race!
What a very good race. Yes. Singapore,
complain.
like we said.
Can't complain. That's all I was saying. Just can't complain.
Yeah, Singapore, like we said, always brings up a good race, and I think there was probably a little bit of a dip in the middle with Carlos controlling the pace, but overall, brilliant. And yeah, speaking of Carlos, let's dive into Ferrari. Carlos with the win, the smooth operator.
Unbelievable.
Second win for Ferrari. I mean, I actually don't know what to say. That was such a well-managed race.
He did it all the way through from Saturday. He did everything he needed to do. He put it on pole. Yep. He dictated the pace when he needed to. He pulled out a tactical masterclass when he needed to. He did everything perfectly correctly, and he was rewarded with the race win. Amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing.
We take the mick out of Ferrari's strategy and performance, but like hands up, they knew exactly what they were doing. They put Leclerc on the soft tyres so they could get past Russell, and then they just backed the pack up, making sure that no one could undercut them. And if a safety car came out, which we'll talk about a little bit later, they were in a good position. But then I am going to admit, when they didn't box when the virtual safety car came out, and the Mercedes did, and I'm like, that's the Ferrari we know. But Carlos was like, I think I'll take over. I think I'll take over strategy and performance. Yeah. I know what I'm doing. Leave me alone. I know what to do, as Kimi would say. Leave me alone. I know what I'm doing. And he just played that perfectly. Kept Lando in DRS, so Lando could pull away and not easily, but defend against Russell, and just managed that race perfectly. He did nothing wrong.
No.
And hats off to him. I know he's had his criticisms in the past, but that was a perfect race from him from start to finish.
Yeah, I really do feel like Carlos is emerging as a proper team leader at Ferrari. And that's not to say that, I think he's a better driver than Charles or anything like that, but sometimes, and we've mentioned it before on the podcast, you just need to take something by the horns and actually make proper decisions, and if fine, I'll do it myself levels. And he did that. He absolutely bossed it, made every single decision correctly. And I know for a fact that if Ferrari had made what he felt like to be an incorrect decision, like not pitting under the safety car like the first time, then I feel like he would have said, no, you're gonna have to pit me. You have to pit me now. It's Singapore. Pit me. So I think he put every single foot correctly. Yeah, absolutely.
It's also interesting that he started to take more of that team lead role and be more vocal on decisions since Fred took over.
Yes.
So I don't know if Fred is creating that environment where be afraid to challenge us. Don't be afraid to challenge us.
He's probably just empowering them to do so. Both drivers, I'd imagine, especially because if you go back to, and this is a slight segue, if you go back to the previous race in Monza, he let them race. Fred let the two Ferraris race, which, I mean...
No risk.
No risk.
They were like, okay.
Go for it. So, I think that he's definitely the right team principal for them right now. And he seems to be getting the most out of both drivers and also the car as well. The car seems to have come forward a decent amount too. So,
Monza and Singapore are two completely different tracks.
Exactly.
And they put it on pole in both
laps.
I know we saw some comments on some of our posts like slipstreams and there's Monza engines, but you put it on pole, you put it on pole.
Yeah. Also, a slipstream and organising a slipstream is still complicated in and of itself as well. So you can't take that away from them either.
Yeah, you can't be too far behind because then they lose downforce and damage the tyres, and you can't be too far ahead, and you got to time it all right. But,
exactly.
I think probably the one misstep, and I'd like to look into it a little bit more, but with team radios and timings, was obviously the double stack because of that, Charles went from P2 and then dropped back. Lando was able to get past him. But it'll be interesting to see if they just mismanaged the timings just a little bit.
Yeah.
And, they just didn't double stack it correctly. And double stacking is very difficult. Mercedes make it look easy and Red Bull make it look easy, but it is very hard. That was probably the one mishap that happened. But overall, we shit on Ferrari, but we've got to hold our hands up and say, well done.
Like I said, pretty much a flawless weekend. They did sacrifice Charles a little bit, but they won the race. So it was very clearly the correct decision.
Yeah, no, and that's what needed to be done. So P2 and P7.
Don't test me. Yeah. Don't test me on my boys. Don't you dare test me.
We're McLaren.
Let's ignore the podium for a second. Making up 10 spaces. 10 spaces.
10 or was it 9? It's 9.
He made up 10 positions, right? From P17 to P7, right? Admittedly, 3 cars retired, but we'll ignore that. But he went from P17 to P7, right? He battled Perez and came out on top as well, might I add. And it's his first ever race at Singapore. The guy smashed it. The guy absolutely smashed it. If Carlos hadn't have won and it had been someone else winning, I'd argue that's driver of the day material.
I would argue Lando would be Lando or Liam Lawson.
Liam also did phenomenally as well, but I still think that it's arguably driver of the day levels. Like that, not everyone goes up 10 places in a race where they've never raced before in Singapore. Like that's ridiculous. So hats off to Oscar, especially because when you compare it to, for example, the other rookie in Logan Sargent, it's just completely different levels. I understand the car's different, but it's completely different levels. But yeah, so Oscar, phenomenal job. But Carl Lando on the podium, it was just vibes.
Let's talk about Lando. Again, he was similar to Carlos. He drove a perfect race. Yep. He kept himself out of trouble, managed to jump Leclerc at the pit stops.
Yep, strategy was good.
Held off the Mercedes of George Russell, and at one point was actually pushing Carlos. He was within a second, and I thought, could Lando get the overtake and the win done here? But then we found out Carlos was just managing the gap. But still, again, at Singapore, it's a long race. It's a difficult race, and he did clip that wall that George clipped at the end, and so he was lucky to just get away with not getting into the barriers.
Yeah.
Well, but again, epic race. These new guys, when you say new, youngsters, these young drivers are showing, hey, look, we've got the racecraft of the Hamiltons, the Alonsos.
You say young drivers. How many races do you think Lando Norris has completed in Formula One?
Loads. He's done loads, isn't he? He joined 2019, didn't he? So he must be on, 60 races? Around 60 races?
I'm trying to figure it out right now.
Well, I'm just averaging
97.
20. Yes. So, like fair play to him. And Carl Lando back on the podium. The bromance will never die.
I tell you what, the hug that they had at the end. Once Carlos had finished celebrating with the Ferrari guys, the hug afterwards, like when he turned around, just like that was brilliant.
I also love the fact that McLaren were there giving him his props as well. So
I think that no matter what, Carlos will always be part of that McLaren family, and I love that. That is absolutely brilliant. And the fact that I know that Zach would have said something completely stupid to him, like "I owe you a drink" or something like that, because like it essentially guaranteed their podium and their P2. What?
Or maybe it's like, I think I'll get a tattoo. A red chili or something. It was also nice, slightly off topic, to not hair the Dutch or Austrian anthem. I quite like the Italian and Spanish anthems. I think they're quite catchy.
They're not bad at all. I mean, I think that we were all a little bit tired of hearing the Dutch national anthem and the Austrian national anthem.
Normal service will resume on Sunday.
Next week it'll be absolutely back to normal. But it's amazing, isn't it, how one person not winning has created so many different storylines within the sport. It's ridiculous.
This is the thing, right? Is people want to see competition for the top spots, right? Because I know there's a lot of battles in the midfield and down, but if you really want people engaged into the sport, in any sport, it's like boxing. You want to see the best fight the best, right? in football, you want to see the Champions League, right? That's so exciting because it's the best teams from each league.
Yeah.
And that's the same with Formula One. It's obviously a lot more difficult, but we don't mind who wins, if it's Hamilton or Verstappen. We just want to see him fight for that championship, which is why I think Alonso is held in so much regard during his Ferrari years, because he just fought all the way to the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, talking about champions, P3, and unfortunately did not finish. Lewis and George. I think it was quite interesting. Lewis came out saying that my quali pace it's not there, but on the race he's got it. So, I mean, that's a mark of a champion, to be like, yeah, I know I need to improve. Happy to say it. And it'd be interesting to see if he starts to beat George more in qualifying.
Yeah,
and
I think especially because you know that Lewis will take some sort of inefficiency in the car during those quali laps to make up for it in race pace. You know he will. He's such a professional that he will absolutely take that on the chin and just go for it. If he knows that that's how he will score maximum points over that weekend, he'll do it regardless. And he's currently winning in the championship against Fernando, I think now.
Yes, he is now up to P3.
Yes.
Yeah. And poor George Russell, he was driving a great race. Good strategy by the team to put them both on the yellow wall tires. But again, and do you know what? I saw this commented quite a little bit. Martin Brundle was absolutely on it with his commentary. He said something about Fernando that we'll touch on later.
Sure.
But he said, when you're chasing someone, you can kind of get lost in chasing them and not be aware of your surroundings. And that's exactly what happened. He was so focused on trying to get past Lando, trying to get to Carlos, trying to get the win, that he just clipped that barrier for about 60 laps. He was inch perfect every time. And it just put him out. And you got to feel for the guy. You know, again, he was driving a good race.
Yeah, I think it is incredibly gutting. And it just goes to show how lethal that track can actually be. I mean, who's to say that, you know, you were saying that Lando was closing the gap on Carlos. If that race had gone on 2 or 3 laps longer, maybe Carlos does clip and then ends up and then Lando ends up winning, or maybe Lando ends up clipping the wall more than he actually did, and then George goes into the back of him and Lewis ends up in P2. So like there's so many different things that could have happened, because you do need to be so millimeter perfect going around those streets, because it's completely unforgiving. And it was very, very unlucky. And you're right, what Martin said was bang on. You can get lost. Like the amount of times where we've played the F1 game and we're so distracted trying to catch up or keep up with each other, we miss braking points and stuff like that. So, and I'm sure anyone who's ever played a video game or something like that will sympathize with it too. But at the end of the day, I think that this will be a big learning curve for George, and it will be something that he should hopefully take on the chin, and he will work on with.
He'll come back stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. You know he will. So I'm looking forward to seeing him back on track in Japan this week.
And it also shows how epic these guys are. So if you just take Carlos, for example, he's driving, he's hot, he's tired, he's sweating. He's got to be inch perfect on braking points, on being close to the barriers, and then he's got to I've got to make sure that Lando is within DRS, and then I also got to defend against him, and I just got to manage the race. And he's doing all of that while driving at 100, 150 miles per hour, where, as George showed, one small mistake, and that's it.
Yeah.
He's out. So if anyone thinks these guys are not athletes, you've got another thing coming.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you could potentially even compare him to his hero is that another driver who's very good at managing the race, not only managing themselves in the car and managing their pace and stuff like that, but managing the race around them, Fernando Alonso.
Yep.
Also incredibly good at managing the entire race.
Yep. So in P6, and unfortunately, because he was also having a good race, did not finish, was Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon.
Hold on. Don't we want to talk a little bit about Lewis?
What do we want to say about Lewis?
Lewis did great. I thought he had a brilliant race.
Yeah, we said that.
Oh, all right, fine. Well,
no, I think we were just
talk about it a little bit more.
I actually totally forgot about P5 and the Red Bulls. I was like, yeah, well, they didn't get on the podium.
No, it's fine. Let's crack on. Let's go through Alpine, and then we'll come to Red Bull at the end. We'll save Red Bull to the end.
Actually, yeah, let's save Red Bull for the end.
Yeah, let's save them to the end. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, P6 did not start. Did not finish. Ocon and P6 for Gasly. Again, got to feel for Ocon. He was doing a great race.
That rubbish French engineering, mate. It's just they can't build engines. They can't. The engine went on strike halfway through the race.
Pierre finished the race.
Well, you get my point. Like, they seem to have quite a few reliability issues, and especially with the supposed development freeze maybe happening for the new regulations around engines, and one team apparently being very far behind, and the only team currently struggling with reliability is Alpine. I wonder which one it could be. Honestly, fix your whole team. Your whole team's washed at the moment. I think we really need to have a discussion about, almost an intervention about Alpine, for me personally, because I just don't think they're on it whatsoever. And how Pierre managed P6 in that tractor is unbelievable. I think he did very well.
Driver.
That's the thing. Pierre is phenomenal. I don't think enough people give him enough respect, to be completely honest. I think he's almost having a second wind in his career, a little bit like Alex Albon, now that he's free of the Red Bull brand, or the Red Bull Driver Academy, which is really nice to see. And yeah, it's just a shame that Alpine, obviously, like, I joke, it's a shame that Alpine couldn't have both cars finish the race.
Alpine are just very forgettable.
That's, I
don't know, maybe they're a little bit shortchanged by race direction, and they're not really on it.
The problem is that a lot of people refer to Alpine as Team Enstone because the team has changed so many different times over the years, right? And if you look at every other team, they have something about them. Even Haas are the underdog. They're the plucky underdog with like pocket money.
And they have Gunther
as well. And like Williams, they have so much heritage, and they've got an exciting youngster in the car. They've got Alex Albon. They've got a little Duracell battery on the back of their car. It's brilliant. But then you've got Alpine. Are they French?
That's it.
Okay.
They're just there.
Great. I like Pierre. He's very attractive. But, I mean, and then you've got Waluigi, driving for you as well. I mean, they don't have anything about them. They're not the Ferrari where ask a child to draw a car, it's red. Ferrari. That's all you need to know. Brilliant.
I also just think the name,
nothing,
the name is just
Alpine.
It's
just a big hill.
It's not exactly. It's not a racing name.
I mean, Alpine racing, like hill climbs and stuff like that. That's where it comes from. But I think the biggest hill they have to climb is dealing with their internal staffing at the moment. To be completely honest, and their team
it's just. Meh. So we'll just move on.
Yes, let's move on. I mean,
let's move on to another did not finish, unfortunately. Yuki Tsunoda and P9 for Liam Lawson.
Yes.
Let's start with Yuki.
Yes.
Do you think it was a penalty? Do you think Sergio diving up the inside and taking out Yuki? I know lap one's treated differently by the stewards. But do you think it was a penalty, or do you think he should have had a penalty?
Let me ask you this: at what point was Perez in front of Yuki?
At no point whatsoever.
Right, penalty.
Yeah,
that's it. I understand it's lap one. You make cheeky moves, but you've DNF'd a car on a move which was not on. It just wasn't. I understand you're frustrated because you're further down in the grid, but no,
and it's a long race as well.
It's not on.
And it's not one of those lap ones where it's like, okay, half a dozen of one, 6 of the other.
Exactly,
okay, maybe he pushed him off, but he still managed to come back on the track. He hit Yuki, and Yuki was out.
Yeah, to me, it's unacceptable.
And I'm really surprised that he didn't get the penalty.
Yeah, 5-second time penalty should have been awarded.
But from the lowest of the lows was the highest of the highest to Liam Lawson.
Yeah, true.
It's like a fairy tale story. Couldn't go to Singapore with his family.
Yeah.
Ends up going there as a driver, getting points your first time there, and really making a name for himself to say, hey, give me a seat.
Yeah.
Rumors are he's not going to get the seat next year. It's going to be Yuki and Daniel.
Yeah.
But apparently he's basically next in line if they don't perform, or if there's a shuffle in 2025.
Yeah. So another point to add as well is that is the highest scoring AlphaTauri of the season.
Boom. So they have more points than drivers now.
They do. Congratulations. So one thing I would like to point out about that is that I think that Yuki probably would have had a better point scoring opportunity had Perez not tried to kill him, or he'd be really unlucky with engines and stuff like that.
Two races in a row where he's not
exactly
able to fight for points.
So home race this weekend. Fingers crossed. If anything comes out of this race, I want points for Yuki at his home race. That's what I want. This weekend.
That'll be. He deserves that after the
absolutely.
Shit he's been through.
Hopefully it will come, but who knows? But back to Liam Lawson. I think yes, that is the current rumor: is that Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo will be confirmed. At some point, probably when Liam disappears back to Super Formula and Daniel comes back into the car. But I did even hear a cheeky rumor that Daniel and Liam Lawson would be the drivers for AlphaTauri, and that Yuki would be the reserve / test driver like Alex Albon was a couple of years ago. So I also heard that rumor. So I don't know exactly what's going on at AlphaTauri. But it goes back to what I keep banging on about. This is why we need more teams in Formula One, because there are not enough seats for the caliber of driver that we have, minus maybe one or two on the current grid, but we haven't spoken about those two gentlemen just yet.
We could have something where, because Fernando's contract ends in 2025,
yes,
he could leave. Yuki goes to Aston Martin Honda, and Liam Lawson comes in with Daniel Ricciardo.
True, but that's still a while off, so who knows?
Yeah. Who knows?
But who knows? But I think that it's very clear and obvious that Lawson deserves a seat in Formula One.
Yeah,
very
100%.
Clear and obvious. And I don't think it would be a similar situation where, last year Nick came in and all of a sudden he, scored points in his first race and he did an absolutely fantastic job. And I don't want to take anything away from that, but I think the situation is different. I think Liam Lawson is just built different. You don't, like I said before, you don't win your debut Super Formula race if you aren't something slightly special. That just doesn't happen.
Also, you don't be one of the drivers to overtake Max Verstappen and also knock him out of qualifying.
Exactly. And this is what I'm talking about. There's something about him which is pretty good.
Yeah,
he's got so much potential there.
Definitely. Let's move on to Haas.
Yes.
P10 for K-Mag getting points.
Boom.
And P13 for Nico. But they had an amazing qualifying.
Oh, brilliant qualifying.
The updates that they brought to that car have really worked well.
Yeah.
They still have the tyre issues, so obviously it helps them in quali, but kind of hinders them in race pace. But fucking hell, you look like fucking rock stars now.
They did look like rock stars. I have to say that Kevin also did say that he wasn't expecting P10 in the end, and he thought it was game over, to quote him directly. And the P10 was really satisfying, which is great to hear. Especially because recently, obviously, Nico has been beating Kevin in the races as race results go, and quali. So for Kevin to have one added to the tally in terms of beat him in the race type thing is quite nice for him, and will probably boost his confidence quite a bit, especially with these upgrades, because we know that both of those drivers at Haas are pretty good. So it'll be interesting to see how far these upgrades will carry them. And it will be interesting to see how these upgrades, and also apparently the planned upgrades coming at COTA, how far forward those upgrades take them for the rest of the season, and how they translate to different tracks, because obviously this track is pretty unique. It's similar-ish to Monaco in certain ways. So yeah, it's a brilliant weekend for Haas, to be completely honest, to get a point. I know it's only a point, but it's a point that they desperately need.
If they can sort out their tyre issues,
they're golden. They are golden. Yeah. And I really, really do hope that they get that issue sorted, because like I said, even 5 minutes ago, they are the plucky underdog who are trying to go racing against the big boys with pocket money. So Gene, get your checkbook out, because very clearly something's going right. And I will say it as well, I didn't like the slander against Gunther in the last couple of weeks, saying that he's not a very good team principal, because clearly he's doing something right. I was just on Twitter, TikTok, that sort of, X, I guess. But yeah,
that's why I love not being on Twitter.
Yeah, I think it's just
you're my Twitter news.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. But speaking of Twitter, we have the 107 podcast account. Please go and follow us. But so
or Threads,
which I don't think we ever check. So if you send us a message on Threads, no idea. I wouldn't be able to. Don't even have the app installed. It's not allowed in the EU. So, but yeah. So like I said, a little bit of slander for Gunther, which I think was undeserved. And yeah, I think the great weekend. Let's push on and see what Haas can do next weekend.
There's a reason why he's been team principal for the past few years.
Absolutely.
Right? We only see, the drive to survive and him doing media stuff. We don't actually see him being a team principal, motivating the team, debrief, speaking to the staff. And that's, if you actually do want to know a little bit more about Gunther behind the scenes, he does the High Performance podcast.
Yes.
And he talks a lot about kind of what you don't see on the cameras.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend it. It's a very, very good podcast.
One thing I would say as well is that when I was there in the paddock, I did ask what Gunther was like with the members of staff, and everyone had really lovely words to say about him. Everyone said that he was absolutely brilliant. So, I mean, they wouldn't just say that. They just wouldn't.
Yeah. Let's move on to Williams, P11 for Albon, and P14 for Logan. If we start with Alex, he was so, because I was say Albon, should say Alex. I really feel for him. He was having a great race, and Sergio was like, pow. And I put it out as a joke, but we were talking about this podcast ago. He got a 5-second penalty for that impact with Alex, but it didn't affect his final. We'll talk about Sergio in a little bit, but it didn't affect his final position. Is that even a penalty?
Not really.
And it was given after the race as well.
Yeah.
So.
Because then, like we've said a couple of times, if you're given a penalty in the race, you drive differently.
Yes,
whereas Daniel Ricciardo's I've got a 5-second time penalty, I'll drive faster. That's the levels of it changes your mentality in the very moment. So, and other drivers behind, you saw even this year in Australia, people were trying to get as close behind Carlos as humanly possible so that Carlos would be demoted. So, it's something which should have been addressed in the race. And potentially, here's even an idea, is that if you're given a time penalty, or if you're given a penalty there after the race that doesn't affect your position, maybe just a little slap on the wrist, you get a 1-place grid penalty applied the next race.
See, I was thinking about things that happened on the next race, but if you give a 1-place grid penalty to a Red Bull, it doesn't really affect them. Penalties have to be a deterrent, right? And
yeah, but the problem is that Sergio did it twice this weekend. And it's not.
I don't know how he got away with it.
I don't know. He should have even got a black and white flag, arguably.
Yeah.
Kevin got one. I can't remember what for. But Kevin got one for this weekend. I can't remember why. I could not tell you why. But I remember seeing it pop up.
Logan Sargent is not having the best of races.
No, I mentioned it earlier as well with drivers who may not necessarily deserve a seat in F1. I'm still on the fence about Logan. I feel like he's been incredibly unlucky.
I'm on the fence because he is a rookie.
And I know we compare Albon.
I know we compare him to Albon, but Albon's got the experience.
Yeah.
But I just don't see the potential. Right? I don't see, he's having a great qualifying or he's putting that car where it shouldn't be. Because, potential is hard. You can't measure it. But you see Liam Lawson come in, and I know they're different cars and different drivers, but you're like, I kind of see what you're doing, and I can see where you could go. I don't see that with Logan.
There hasn't been a moment like a save or an overtake or anything that I've seen from him where I've gone, okay,
it's not even that. It's just be within a certain time of your teammate, right? Because if you qualify P20, you qualify P20, but if it's a 10th of Alex in P19,
fine,
right?
Sure,
I understand that,
But if Alex is P, let's say 15, and he's 0.8 seconds off, you start questioning it.
You do.
And I don't think this helps him as well, because then you look at Oscar, who's also a rookie, and he's smashing it. He got a podium.
Yeah.
Well, sort of. He got a third of a podium. So that's the other thing as well. Is that I think that there are some very unfair comparisons.
Yeah, because
made.
even when the McLaren was bad, Oscar was within a fair time of Lando.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, we know the car's bad for both Lando and Oscar, but they're both doing what they can.
Exactly. Also, the McLaren that Lando was driving this weekend had one or two slight changes compared to Oscar's. Just to make you aware as well.
What changes?
I don't know, but I as far as I know, Oscar had one or two tiny upgrades unavailable to him.
Okay.
Just to make you aware.
All right. I'm not going to dive into the next team because I just want to, because it's going to be very quick to cover off. Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas did not finish. Zhu did quite well, P12. I think the key thing to say for them is Zhu was signed for next year.
Yes.
So there was some
talk, honestly.
Yeah, there was some talk about someone else coming in, them not agreeing to a contract. But they have it all sorted, and I think he's doing the right shoe, and I'd like to see him in Formula One for another season.
I think he's doing well enough to deserve that seat. He does push Valtteri when he needs to, and we know that Valtteri isn't a complete pushover. He's not maybe the best driver in the world, but he's not a complete pushover, and he's a solid driver that you can rely on. I think that, in all honesty, I think part of the reason why the contract wasn't signed, and I know this from various other different bits and pieces, is probably because sponsorship money and getting money out of China right now can be quite difficult. I think that may have something to do with it.
I see. But he's showing improvement, and it'll be interesting to see what he does next season. So, one of the teams we're actually going to talk a lot about, we'll start off with Lance.
Yeah.
Wow. What a crash.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that is a horrific crash. Ridiculous.
To see him get up and walk away from that is a testament to safety in Formula One.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like very rarely do you see the wheel tethers fail on these cars. So the speed he hit that barrier at, I think they said he pushed it back about 3 or 4 meters. I
wouldn't surprise me, yeah. And he span round quite a bit as well. So
you could see his head going side to side.
I don't know what the G would have been,
nice.
But maybe you talk a little bit more while I quickly Google what that would have been.
Yeah, so he had to go to the weighbridge.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was in the elimination zone, so he was really pushing. Well, had 2 personal bests in Sector 1 and Sector 2. Overcooked it coming out the last couple of corners, and probably would have got through to the second round of qualifying, but he hit that barrier really, really hard.
He hit it at 110 miles an hour.
Wow. That is insane. Absolutely destroyed the car. They couldn't get it fixed in time for the race, but also he mentioned that he was feeling a bit sore. Probably wouldn't have been able to give 100%, especially in a race as demanding as Singapore.
Yeah.
And rightfully, I think it was the right decision, withdrew from the race so he can be fully prepped for Japan.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the G-force, but the only thing that I've seen apparently is that the G-ometer thingy apparently broke.
Wow.
Apparently.
Okay.
But I'd imagine it would be pretty heavy to have done that. Because somebody on Reddit has said the G-force measuring thing probably broke.
Really glad that he was able to get up and walk away from that. I think the safety cell, pretty well. There was comparisons to Senna's incident. Senna's incident, and it just shows you how far safety has come in Formula One. And that was, I think, one thing you never get from the onboards and the Formula One feed is the sound of the crash. And I know a video went viral of someone recording it from on their phone.
Yeah.
And when you hear that you hear the sound, you're like, ooh.
Yeah, it was horrific. Yeah. I personally feel as though there were a couple of other reasons, external reasons, as to why he didn't race. And I know from other teams and stuff like that essentially there used to be a rule about this. There used to be a spare car. So if you crashed it in qualifying, don't worry because there's a spare car. I mean, do worry because you've got to pay hundreds of thousands of pounds or maybe even millions in terms of damage, but there's a spare car. So I know that they would have had all of the components there to make a car. They would have broken the curfew and they probably would have got it done ready for the next day. However, and I've been getting the feeling over the last couple of weeks that I just don't think that Lance's heart is in it anymore. And I think that massively contributed to whether or not he took part in the race. Because I know that they have Felipe Drugovich, they have, who's the other one who used to drive? Stoffel Vandoorne. They had those two reserve drivers available to them. So if he was injured, they could have called on those two drivers as well.
No, they couldn't have.
Couldn't they?
No, I think you have to have done at least one session.
Okay. They've not done. Okay, all right. Yeah. But
I don't know if it's one session in the entire calendar or one session in
the weekend.
The race, in the weekend.
Yeah,
because there was like obviously joking. They were saying, "Oh, can we get Seb in the car?"
Yeah, get Seb in the car. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to have done a session.
Okay. Well. In that case, then, I still feel as though I just don't think his heart's in it anymore. I think you saw there was a video of all of the drivers leaving one of the drivers' briefings, and he was the only one on his own. He looked very sheepish, didn't look like he was particularly paying much attention, type thing coming out of the room. Everyone else was chatting and like talking through bits and pieces. I don't know if you've seen the video, if anyone else has seen the video.
I've seen it, but I don't take 10-second videos.
Yeah, no, I know. But I think that added with him looking very dejected and very demotivated after the Monza race as well, and then this crash as well. I just don't think his heart's in it, and I don't think his heart's been in it for a couple of weeks now. I think something has mentally changed. And that's not to say that it couldn't come back, but for me personally, I just don't think his heart is in it at the moment.
Yeah, we'll have to see. He could come back in Japan. He
Absolutely, yeah. I want him
season to be over, and you know what? I'm just gonna chill out. Yeah, we'll see. But
like, was he even around in the pit lane?
Nah, but I don't think he. Yeah, I don't think he would have.
But he should have been in the garage.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
like he should have been around, and he wasn't. I don't think he was.
So. Yeah, well, we'll see what the next few weeks holds for him. Fernando, a race to forget.
Yeah, he was incredibly unlucky with the safety car as well.
So what happened was apparently he got suspension damage, I believe, from debris from, I think it might have been Tsunoda, but he got suspension damage. And this is where I was talking about earlier where Martin Brundle picked up on two things. The first was George Russell. The second one was he noticed that Fernando's steering wheel was slightly to the right.
Yeah.
And then that was kind of backed up by saying Fernando had suspension damage, which is probably what caused him to lock up when he went for his pit stop and get the penalty, and why he locked up towards the end of the race and kind of just was losing pace.
Yeah.
But yeah, a race to forget. I'm a little bit worried about Aston because they're supposed to be optimizing, continually developing that car, but Haas are out developing them. McLaren are way out developed them. Ferrari have, Mercedes have, and I'm like, what's going on, right? You said you were going to be bringing upgrades. And
yeah,
I was just going backwards.
I do feel as though what essentially happened is that Aston Martin were ahead of the curve, and all of the other teams are now ahead of the curve, ahead of them. And essentially, these curves are just happening at different times. They're just different waves. And so what will happen is that Aston Martin will come back and peak again, I'm sure, once they get these upgrades sorted. So I'm not particularly worried. I think you should only really be worried when the drivers start really complaining about the performance of the car with no damage. I know that Fernando made a comment on the radio, I think, about driving the car today, saying that it was on Sunday that it wasn't a particularly good car to drive, and
I think that was just down to the suspension damage.
To the suspension damage. But if he starts doing it on a regular basis, like he did before at McLaren, GP2 engine, we all know about that, then I think that's when we have to worry. But other than that, I think they're okay. They're not amazing, and I feel like if they miss out on P3 in the constructors, it won't be because they didn't upgrade the car.
I think it's because of that, because I've seen what McLaren are doing, I've seen what Haas are doing, see what Mercedes are doing, and that's the thing. If you want to be a top team, you can't just start off with the best car. You have to continually improve it throughout the season.
True, but you also need two solid drivers. So I don't blame the car and the development team.
I'm going to put a little bit of blame on them, because even if Lance is not pulling his weight, you've got
no, that's fair enough. But I think at the same time, we all know that Lance should have had a hell of a lot more points than Fernando does.
Yeah, no, that's true. But maybe he's playing the long game. So if we finish down, we're going to get wind tunnel time. We're going to get wind tunnel time. So yeah. So let's move on to our final team.
Yes.
Red Bull. A weekend to forget for both Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. There's three things I want to cover: the qualifying, the car performance, and the race performance. So let's start off with qualifying.
Yeah.
How did Max not get a penalty?
I don't know.
Right. How?
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you how.
Oh, go on.
Because the one that should have been a penalty with Yuki Tsunoda, right? And you've seen penalties being given them before. Charles Leclerc had it.
True.
Right? They didn't. They gave him 3 reprimands, right? I think the other 2 you could justify it, but the Yuki one was clear.
Yeah, for me the Yuki one was clear.
No one from AlphaTauri showed up to the hearing. And that was taken into consideration. So these sister teams in Formula One, they need to look into it, because that's not right. He should have been given a penalty. He should have been given a penalty for that.
If that's any other team, you've got lots of people turning up.
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not that would have been something that they purposefully did or not. They did. But probably.
Are you telling me Mercedes wouldn't have turned up if it was them?
Oh,
Are you telling me Ferrari wouldn't have turned up if it was them?
But
because it was the sister team.
But if
they're like, we can't have Max even further back.
Yeah, true. But if it was potentially, let's say Williams Mercedes, do you think Williams would have turned up? Sister-ish team, almost sister team.
It's a sister-ish team. Right?
Yeah,
everyone knows AlphaTauri is a Red Bull feeder. But then that calls into question the stewards, right?
True.
Is it's a slam dunk penalty. Why do you need AlphaTauri to turn up?
We already know the stewardship is bad. We don't need anything else to confirm it. We know that the stewardship in F1 is completely inconsistent and it is not up to scratch. But that's a topic for a different day. But that is quite bad. But that does explain why, and I didn't know that. That's quite interesting. But that being said, it still doesn't excuse their poor quali performance.
Right. So there's a great article on the race by Mark Hughes that I urge everyone to go and read. So what the reasoning was behind their poor performance is a Red Bull run. Their car is optimized for a lower ride height.
Yeah.
But coming into Singapore, because it's bumpy and they had a similar issue with spark compression, they have to raise the ride height, which then disrupts how the car is optimized.
Yes.
And that was the reasoning for their poor performance. Expect normal service to resume in Suzuka.
Yeah.
And also Max pretty much confirmed it when he said on the simulator, it did actually do what we thought it was going to do, where the car would perform not great. And then they did the simulator at Suzuka and it was all back to normal.
Yeah.
So for those of you that were missing the Dutch and Austrian anthems,
it's
only a week.
Yeah.
It's only a few days.
Don't worry about it.
The Formula One outro theme will be back on resuming normal
service. The Max Verstappen podcast will return.
He will return. He's just on hiatus kind of thing.
Yeah. One very quick point as well is that I know a couple of people pointed towards there being upgrades, but the upgrades only Max ran in first practice. That was it.
Yeah.
So just to point that out. Otherwise, everything was exactly the same as it was before.
Yeah. And it was the same. Race performance just wasn't there. They started on the hard tires. The safety car wasn't kind to them, and pretty much Max did the best he could.
Yep.
Could have got P4 of Charles because Charles is having an engine issue. I think he made up something really silly, like a whole load of time in the last few laps. Like 12 or 17 seconds or
Yeah.
something like that. It was insane. And Perez was just like, did you used to drive for Red Bull? Or do you want to drive for Red Bull? I think I'll take you out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he should have really got a harsher penalty, I believe, and should have got a penalty for Tsunoda. But, yeah, a weekend to forget for them. When everyone was talking about could they win the Constructors, they didn't really get enough points.
So, no, all things must come to an end, including a win streak for Red Bull. But they'll bounce back next weekend. I think the only hugely disappointing thing, really, I would think would be probably, Aston, because they were expecting to do a hell of a lot better at that track than they did. That's the only really real thing that, outside of my expectations, I expected Aston to be a bit better. But I personally didn't expect Red Bull to be this bad. I thought they'd probably get a podium. And we joked that they changed the sector 3 of the track as well to benefit Red Bull because there was potentially another overtaking zone. And it didn't benefit them whatsoever. And then going back slightly to talk about the boys in red at Ferrari, and you were talking about ride height as well. You could actually see that the Ferrari was incredibly low to the ground because it was sparking a lot more than pretty much every other car out there on track. So just something else to bear in mind, and that's potentially why Ferrari were able to maintain their performance from previous weeks and carry it through into Singapore.
Yeah. It's everyone will say this, even Max fans and Red Bull fans. It was nice to see a few different cars challenge for the
refreshing.
win.
It's definitely refreshing.
And but yeah, expect normal service to resume. And it wasn't Ferrari that broke McLaren's streak, wasn't it? That season when McLaren won every race but one, and it was Ferrari that won. That was race. I believe it's Monza.
That was a safety car in Monza. There was a reason for that,
but who won the race?
If you go back and look at it, it's bullshit.
Who won the race? Who won the race?
Pretty sure it was Ferrari. But if you go back and look at it, it's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. They should have had a clean sweep the entire season.
So, but it didn't happen, and it was Ferrari that did it again. So, but they did it on merit.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see what happens in Japan. And that's everything from my end on Singapore. Anything else you want to talk about or cover?
How did you enjoy the race? What did you think?
I thought it was a great race.
Yeah.
I thought it was great driving by Ferrari and Carlos.
Yep.
Good strategy by Ferrari. Mm-hmm. Thought they almost screwed it up at the end, but Carlos saved the day. And I was saying this to someone earlier at work. It's just nice to see, and I kind of said it earlier to you in the podcast, it's nice to see important positions, 1, 2, and 3, being fought for by different teams.
Yeah.
Right. It was just nice to see, could it be McLaren? Could it be Ferrari? Could it be Mercedes rather than, Max. All right, cool. All right. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Said at last week's podcast, there's always good races at Singapore.
Yep.
And looking forward to next season's race.
Yes. And so would you say that it is the race of the season so far?
Of course. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. I think that has to be said. I think Zandvoort was pretty good, probably number 2 or 3 race this season, but Singapore definitely topped it for sure.
Yeah, I'd even put Monaco up there. I enjoyed that. That was a good race.
Monaco was okay, I think, but I'm still a little bit salty that Aston Martin pitted twice in 2 laps for wets and inches. And, stupid. Anywho,
I forgot to put a picture up on the 107 podcast Instagram. Mm-hmm. I'll put it up anyway because McLaren got a podium. Their sign is orange.
Yes, I did see that the trophy had made it back safe and sound.
Yes,
which is good.
So, it's normally white. I'll put it on our Instagram story if you follow us on Instagram. But it was orange. So, yeah, I'm not getting out and taking a picture of the sign. I refuse to do it.
Sorry, it was what color?
White.
No. What color was it this weekend?
Papaya.
Thank you.
Sorry. It's normally white. Yeah. I refuse to just park up and take a picture of that sign.
I get it.
So you're gonna get a blurry picture from the car.
Amazing. Yes, but yeah, absolutely fantastic race. Can't really complain. Roll on Japan.
Roll on Japan.